Man, it's our birthday, so happy birthday, Purpose Church. It is hard to believe that we have been doing this for 1 year. What an amazing, crazy, stressful, faithful year it has been. God has been with us every step of the way, but I just want to say thank you so much for being with us today as we celebrate our first birthday. We did it. We made it to 1 year. I mean, there were moments where I'll be perfectly transparent. I was wondering, are we going to make it to our first birthday? You got to remember, during this year, 52 weeks ago, when we launched this church, who knew what God would be able to do in 1 year? And I'm going to share a few things with you today. I've got a message that I think is for our church right now in this season as we walk into what's next. But before we do that, I obviously want to give God credit and God praise for what He has done in this past year, because it has been nothing short of a miracle that we are standing here today in the position that we find ourselves in to continue to say, God, how will you call us to reach this city and this county that you have called us to? So I just want to take a moment. And first, I want to just say thank you to each and every person in this room. And there's many that are not in this room today that have been a pivotal part of allowing Purpose Church to make it to where we are at today. We don't take you for granted. Our dream team, let's give it up for our dream team today. Thank you so much. For those of you that are new with us, we call that our volunteers. We have guys and ladies that get here as early as 6:30 on some Sunday mornings to set all of this stuff up. Everything you see, none of this happens without them setting it up. We pull up in a trailer, unload it, set it up, and I want to say thank you. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your servant attitudes. Thank you for your spirits in which you do things with. And then obviously, man, I just want to thank God. God has been so good to us in our first year. God has done far more than I could have imagined, and we're going to go through some things in just a moment that will maybe make sense of that. But you have to remember, we're 52 weeks old today. 52 weeks old. If you would have told me on September the 15th last year when we launched this church, as we came into a new city, launched the church, moved out here, myself and my family, my amazing wife and our 2 boys, we moved from our previous city, which was Pearland, and we had been there for 12 years, been serving on staff at a church for 10, and we moved out here to start a new church, not knowing really anybody. Our initial launch team, when we made the announcement, it was 8 people, and out of those 8 people, 2 of them were our kids. So man, we love them, but we knew they weren't going to be a whole lot of help. But God has been faithful in growing the team. But if you would have told me 52 weeks ago that in the middle of our first year, we would face a pandemic, there was not one thing that I went through in training. When I talked to all these different pastors, no one mentioned anything about, hey, just so you know, this is how you go through a pandemic. This is what happens when you can't physically have church. But literally on our 6th-month anniversary, all of a sudden, COVID-19 hits the world, hits our country, starts hitting our city, and we had to make the decision to become an online-only church. We went online only for 15 weeks. 15 Sundays where we literally could not gather is not the preferred methodology of a lot of people that would tell you to try to build a team and build momentum, go online only. You won't find that anywhere. But for 15 weeks, I preached to a camera. For 15 weeks, our worship team would gather, and our worship team grew in the midst of the pandemic. So praise God for that. But I remember the first time that we faced the pandemic, someone asked me, what are you going to do for services? And I said, at the moment, my plan is I'm probably going to go live on my patio on my phone on Sunday morning. We didn't have the capability to do anything production-based or anything like that. That was literally our plan as we walked towards a Sunday. On Wednesday of that week, I get a phone call from a company that we had dealt with in the past. They're actually the company that designed our logo and designed our website. And he said, what are you going to do for online services? And I said, well, I'm going to take my phone, I'm going to sit on my patio, and I'm going to share some kind of message for 20 or 30 minutes, I guess. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, I want to record messages for you. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you, man, I don't think I have what you're going to want. And he said, no, he said, I'm going to gift this to you to get you started. He said, I want to just give this to you. I'm going to do it for you, absolutely no charge. So that was a Wednesday. I called Hannah and I said, are you ready to lead some worship sets on Friday? We've got like 2 days notice. We're going to have to turn this around. You're going to be leading worship with people that you have never met because there's going to be some churches that are sending people to us to help us. And I said, I just need to know that you're good because I got to go in my office and write 3 messages because I got to record 3 sermons, as many as I can. And for 15 weeks, this is what we did as a church. There was a night where that first night, I'll never forget it. Hannah and the team finished leading worship at 11:30. I was preaching my first message at 11:45 at night. I ended up finishing and leaving that place at 1:30 in the morning. But I just look back and say, God, you have carried us through everything so well. We have seen things happen through those 15 weeks that would not have happened if it weren't for the pandemic. So how many of you know that even something the enemy means for evil, God will turn it around and use it for our good? Well, like I said this morning, I have a message that I want to share with you. But before I do that, I want to just give God praise for what He's done. I want to share some things with y'all. And I just want to encourage you to realize that as I share the things that I'm going to share over the next few moments, that none of this is possible, 1, without God, and 2, without you, your faithfulness, your generosity, because I've been amazed to see what God has done. The first thing that we're obviously excited about, and the thing that we made our number 1 priority when we launched Purpose Church, is we wanted to see people get saved. So I'm excited to say in our first year that we know about, we have had over 60 people give their heart and life to God. That's something to celebrate. That is something to not say, God, we'll just jump past that. But that's something to celebrate. And the reason I say that we know of, we reached hundreds, if not thousands of people for 15 weeks in a row on our online platform. I can tell you one person actually contacted us through our online message to let us know that he had accepted Jesus through that message. He is still an active participant in our online services that we now do on Wednesday nights. So that's the first thing I wanted to celebrate. That's worth celebrating because that is why we do what we do. The next thing that I want to celebrate is we decided as a church that we believe the local church is the hope of the world. We believe that the local church is the hope of the world. We believe that Purpose Church is the hope of the world. But we believe the church around the corner is the hope of the world. We believe in churches. We did not ever want to plant a church that would be about us, that would be solely about what God could do only through us. But we wanted to say, God, if you will give us resources, we will share them with churches that need them. So I'm excited to say that in our first year, we have been able to financially bless 11 different churches throughout our first year. And I wanted to just give some examples of what we have done, because sometimes I think when you hear numbers, you can just say, oh, they probably sent them a thank you card. I want to share you some examples of what we've done. One thing that we did as a church that is actually not far from us here locally, they had got a new building. It was a big stretch of faith for them. And I just felt led. I asked Lisa, this was actually right before we physically had our first service, but I felt like God told me, sow a seed now for what I'm going to do for you later. And we paid their first month's rent in their new building. I said, how much is it? He said, it's a substantial increase from what we're used to. I said, well, we're going to pay your entire first month for you so you can get in there, get traction, and get going. That's just one thing that we were able to do. We were able to bless recently when COVID-19 started, another church that is local here, not far from our city. We were able to bless them with a camera so they could actually do online messages. Here's the amazing part of that story. We gave them the camera literally 3 hours before I got the phone call saying, hey, I want to record messages for you for free, because I felt like God said, you're going to do what I tell you to do. I'm going to take care of ways that you don't see coming. So that's one thing we did. We helped a church in Corpus Christi. They had their entire trailer stolen. As a portable church, that's like somebody burning your building down. Literally stole their entire trailer and the truck that pulled the trailer. We were able to financially send them some money to help them get going. We were able to bless 2 brand new churches, 2 churches that actually launched after we did. Because we believe the local church is the hope of the world. We were able to bless 2 brand new church plants with over $2,000 of equipment and finances. And then just last month, we were able to partner with a church in Ohio to help them retrofit one of their members' houses so they can be expedited up on the list for a kidney transplant, because there are certain things you have to have established in your home before you can get up on that list. These are all things we're able to do because of your generosity, because of your faithfulness. The next thing that we're excited about is we partnered with 5 outreach partners this year. 5 different outreach partners. Our mission as a church was that we were gonna reach people through our local services. We're gonna reach people through local outreach. We're gonna reach people through church planning, and we're gonna reach people through outreach partners. This year, we were able to partner with 5 outreach partners. One of the outreach partners that we partner with is called ARC. It's the Association of Related Churches. We are an ARC church. What that means is basically they provided us with a little bit of training and some resources, and we partner with them. Every month for a year, we have sown in to this church planting organization, and it's pretty cool to know that in the next 30 days, 32 churches will be launched around the country and around the world, and we have been able to sow in to every single one of them. There's another outreach partner locally called Hope for 3. They're a special needs organization that helps families living on the spectrum of autism. We have provided over $2,000 to this organization to help fund a monthly meetup for dads. So dads of special needs, kids like myself, we can get together once a month, connect with each other, speak with each other, and we funded those dinners throughout the last year. Many of you remember at Christmas, we partnered with the Texas Dream Center. We were able to provide over 200 Christmas presents valued at over $2,000 to an organization right here in Houston to give children in the inner city a Christmas that they would not have had otherwise. During the pandemic, we were able to purchase bedding for over 30 soldiers returning home to Fort Hood that would not have had families to welcome them, and we were able to partner with a local nonprofit and purchase bedding for them so they would have something nice when they came home. So we've been able to partner with 11 churches, 5 outreach partners. The next thing that we did is we had 2 outreach events. 2 outreach events. One of the ones that we did was this time last year. Some of you may remember this, but we came up with the idea that we know teachers buy a lot of their supplies on their own. How many of y'all know teachers don't get everything they need for their classrooms? So we just made a Facebook post on our church page and said, hey, all the teachers out there, if you will respond with your Amazon wish list, you might get some surprises in the mail. We were able to purchase over $1,000 worth of supplies for local teachers from all over Fort Bend County because of generosity of people. And then last Halloween, we partnered with an event right here at Constellation Field where we met so many people. Not only did we meet some really cool people, but out of an outreach event, we had a family come into the church literally almost 2 or 3 months later. We ended up dedicating their baby here at the church, and the only reason they came was because we served at an event on Halloween. So I just want to say thank you all for what you do. So because of all of these things that are made possible by your generosity and obviously by the faithfulness of God, this is what I want to celebrate. First, I just want us all to have a reality check. And I want you to kind of look around the room right now. I know for those of you watching online, you're not going to be able to look around the room, but I will just tell you, you're not going to see a gigantic group of people in this room. But if you look around this room and you say, God, what would be possible if we had faith and we were faithful? What would be possible if we said, whatever you send to us, we're going to do everything we can to steward it well and give it out to the people that desperately need it? as of today that we have been able in the life of our church that is only 1 year old, that had 15 weeks in the middle of a pandemic, as of this morning, we have given away $33,000, $622.16. That is a miracle. That is a miracle. If you look around this room and you say, how in the world would that be possible? That is possible because God can do anything when people are doing what God tells them to do. We have been able to bless through missions, outreach, and benevolence over $33,000 for a church that is a year old today. That is a miracle. And I just want to say thank you for what you have done to give towards that. I am excited because what I have learned, and I want to go ahead and give you a little precursor for where we're going with the message here in just a moment. If God can do that in the middle of a year with a pandemic, what in the world can God do next? If God can allow us to be such a crucial part to help so many people, this should prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that God can do anything. So now that we have kind of gone over and celebrated all of these things that God has done this year, I want to take a moment and I want to share a word for what I believe God has for us next. Let's read Exodus chapter 14, verses 10 through 14. They'll be on the screen. It says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were Egyptians marching around them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out to Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone? Let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. I kind of picked this up in mid-story because of sake of time today. But basically, Moses had asked all of these people, let's go. Follow me. I'm going to lead you out to the place where we are going. So he does what God tells him to do. He calls the people out and they start moving. And then all of a sudden in this first part of the passage that we read today, Moses and the Israelites find themselves in a tough spot. Have you ever found yourself in a tough spot where you know you're doing what God has called you to do? You know you're going where God has told you to go, but all of a sudden you find yourself in a tough spot? Moses led the people to where God told them to go. And they get to the Red Sea, and all of a sudden they are stuck. How many times has this happened in our lives? How many times do we know that God is leading us to do something and we do it and we get to that point and we feel like, man, we're being obedient, we're being faithful, we're going where God has told us to go, we're giving what God has told us to give, we're serving in the area where God has told us to serve, we're doing all the things that we know we're supposed to be doing, but it just feels like every time we do it, we get to the point and we get stuck. I love in this passage how strong and secure Moses appears to be when he says that in verse 13 through 14, as we read it, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you'll never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need to only be still. He has these people coming to him saying, why did you lead us out just to have us die? We could have stayed where we were and served them, and at least we would live, but you let us out, and now we're going to die. Why are you going to do it? And Moses, in the face of that, says, do not be afraid. Stand firm. What faith, what a sense of security that Moses must have had in God. At least that's the way we think when we read it. Until we read the very next passage in Exodus 14, verses 15 through 25. Listen to this. Right after Moses says, do not be afraid, stand firm. 15 starts, then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? This doesn't sound like the Moses that just told everybody, do not be afraid, stand firm. God's going to get us, we're going to be okay. But in the very next verse, hey Moses, why are you crying out to me? Moses was putting on the right things to everybody, but down deep he was thinking, God, I need you to show up. So in verse 15, the Lord says to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all of his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's armies, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and a wall of water on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. As I read through this section of the passage today, I have to remind myself how often I act like Moses. How often I can say the right things. How often as a leader and a pastor, I can stand up and I can push people forward and I can cheer them on and I can say that God's going to get us through this. Don't you worry, just be still. God is fighting for us, and I can put off the right thing to everybody else, but then when everybody else is not looking, I go crying behind and I ask God, why? 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 I did what you asked me to do. I led them to where you asked me to lead them. And now this happened. And I think what we can learn in this passage, number one, is you know what? Moses is a pretty significant figure in the Bible. And if Moses, at a point in his life where he saw God not doing what he was expecting to do, we can expect sometimes we're going to see the same thing. And we can also know and have confidence in the fact that God is not going to be insulted by our crying out to Him, because we are His children. A child's role in a life with their father is sometimes to cry out for them because they need help, they need clarification, they need to know answers. It's no different than my boys. When they need something, they come to me. If they're if something all of a sudden catastrophic happened and they're crying out to me, you know what I don't do? I don't look at them and say, hey, why in the world would you come crying to me? You know how I dealt with that last time. You know I'll take care of you. You know it's going to be all right. You better dry them tears up. You better not ever come back to me and act like that again. No, as a father, I embrace them. I pick them up and I tell them, I have got you. We're going to get through this. Whatever this is that's causing you this pain right now, I am going to make it better. I feel like what God would tell somebody in this room today is He has heard your cry. Your cry has not pushed Him away. Your cry is right on His heart, and He is saying that I am with you, I have got you, and I am going to get you through this. But I want to notice two things in this passage that I read through very quickly. But in verse 16, God tells Moses, raise your staff and stretch out your hand. And then in verse 21, it says, then Moses stretched out his hand. I believe there's something very powerful that God is showing us in this passage today. And this just jumped off the page at me. Number one, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I'm sorry I'm giving you numbers. I'm just saying number one. Like there's no points on the screen for you ADD people. Like they're not forgetting something. But the first thing beyond a shadow of a doubt is He is the miracle worker. God is the miracle worker. If you read this passage and see what God did, He splits the sea. He causes a cloud to come up where they can't see each other. The competitors can't see each other to let one get through. And then as the Egyptians are in the sea, He causes confusion, locks up their wheels. God did all of that. God is the miracle worker, beyond a shadow of a doubt. But I want us to pay attention to the timing of the miracle. The miracle happened only after Moses was willing to stretch out his hand. The miracle didn't happen until then. The miracle didn't happen. All of a sudden, everything didn't start happening. And then God said, well, hey, Moses, now that you see everything is going the way that you thought it would be going, will you do what I need you to do? No. He said, Moses, in the midst of all of the chaos and the adversity and the stuff that's coming in from behind you and the battle that you are about to face, the imminent death that seems to be knocking on your door, in the midst of all of that, I want to know, can I trust you to stretch out your hand over the sea? It's not going to make sense, Moses. You're not going to be able to make sense of what I'm telling you to do. But if it needs to make sense, you will never do what God is telling you to do. I believe that as we walk into a new season, God is asking, can I trust you? That will you just get to the bank of something? And even though you can't see where you're going, can I trust you to be willing to stretch even before you see it? Too many times we want to see the miracle and then we're willing to move. What miracle in your life has God been preparing for you that you are only going to see on the other side of you stretching? How many of us right now have found ourselves for so long, like we are literally on the bank of the ocean and we're saying, God, I don't see a way. We're not going to be able to get there. And God is just saying, I've already prepared everything that's going to happen. God had already prepared every detail of how that was going to happen because God is all-knowing. He's all-present. He doesn't change. He knew every intimate detail of what He was going to do to cause Moses to lead the people to where they needed to get. And even though He knew every single detail, every single thing was prepared, every single thing was laid out in advance, He still asked Moses, will you stretch? He doesn't need... This is the realization that some of us need to come to. God does not really need us. He chooses to use us. And in this moment, God chooses to use Moses. He chooses to use Moses to lead people out. What miracle could be waiting on you to stretch? The prayers that you have been praying for so long, could it be the answer is coming only on the other side of you being willing to stretch? What could God have waiting for you, but you're going to have to stretch to get it? In Exodus chapter 14, as we continue in verse 26 through 31, it says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing towards it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen. The entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea, not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in Him and in Moses, His servant. By this time in this story, I think we have established that God is the one doing the miracle. God is the one doing the miracle. But there's something so interesting in this to me, is that He once again tells Moses to stretch. He had asked Moses to stretch out your hand over the sea, and the waters split. And as the waters split and the Israelites began walking through, they got to the other side. They're on the other side. They have reached the point where they wanted to reach. God has done the miracle that He said He would do. And as they reach the miracle, notice God's first command to Moses. You are finally where I called you to be. You've reached the promised land. You've reached the goal line. And now that you're there, Moses, He didn't tell him to celebrate. He didn't tell him to dance. He said, Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back. The same God that split the waters in half to allow them to walk through on dry ground is now telling Moses, hey, you were part of the miracle back then, and you're about to be part of the miracle right now, because I want you to stretch out one more time, and the waters are going to close back up. I think the problem is in many of our lives is we think that when we stretch, it's a one-time thing. Well, God, I prayed a lot last week. God, I gave a lot that one time when 25 years ago, when that pastor got on my emotions, and I gave a lot that one time, and I stretched. I just want to tell you that I believe that this year, and when I say this year, over the next 12 months, I believe that God wants to do a miracle through our church in this city. I believe it with everything in me. Because He already has last year. And if He can do what He did last year in the midst of all the chaos, craziness, and confusion and everything that happened, I believe that He wants to do a miracle through our church in this city in the next 12 months. But to get there, I believe He's going to ask every one of us to stretch. I believe that God right now would tell us, we're all standing on the edge of something. And I have positioned your church right on the edge of what's coming next. And will you be willing to go towards it and not just stay back? I feel like too often in the body of Christ that we're really good at standing on the edge of something. But there's something special that happens when we'll take the step over and say, God, we don't know what happens out here. We knew what happened here. Right here, we had security. Right here, we had a lot of answers. But there's something special that will happen when we say, God, we don't know, but we know you. Are you willing to stretch? I just want to tell everybody in this room today that God never wants to get you to a point where you feel that you don't need Him. His goal as our Heavenly Father is not to get you to a point in your life where you think you don't need Him. He doesn't want to get you to a point of security where you just think you don't need Him anymore. He doesn't want to give you all the blessings in the world if they're going to be given to you and then all of a sudden you're just going to decide, I don't need Him anymore. He doesn't want us to get to that point. I believe the point where He wants to get us is that we know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, if He does not show up, we will fail. We have to have Him show up because if we don't, we will fail. Because that's where He wants to get us. That is how we get from the edge to taking a step and saying, God, I will stretch to what it is you are telling me to stretch toward. In this passage, God commanded Moses to stretch out his hand to split the sea. Then He commands him to stretch out his hand again to have the sea go back. And I want to take a moment because I think there's something significant in here that's not even in my notes. The first part of the miracle was to split the sea to get the people to where they needed to be. The second part of the miracle was stretch your hand so I can close it to keep the people that are behind you that don't need to be here where they're at. He had them open, and then He had them close. I think there's something significant that God allowed Him to play a part in the miracle in the beginning and in the end. Because here's what I want to tell you. Wherever it is that God takes us, whatever it does that God does for us as a church, I don't believe that when we get there, that we're done. He's going to say, okay, now that I've gotten you here, go a little bit deeper. And now that I've gotten you there, go a little bit further, because it's not a one-time thing. I believe in the life of a believer that God is consistently wanting us to stretch, to rely on Him. I believe that today, that as we move into a new year for our church, that what God is asking every single one of us, and I'm saying I'll put both hands in the air, every single one of us is to stretch. And I just want to ask you, when the time comes, when God leads you, when God guides you, will you be obedient when He asks you to stretch? Because Moses could have been like, you know what? They already think I'm going to kill. They already think they're dying because of me. I already look stupid. I'm not going to stretch my hand out. He could have chose to say no. The story would have played out a lot different, but he could have chose to say no. I want to tell you that when God moves in your heart and moves in your life, you have a right to say no. But you also have the right to say yes. And when you say yes to God, something miraculous can happen in your life. I believe that this year stretching is going to look different for everyone in the room and everybody watching online. I believe that God's going to ask some of us to stretch in bigger ways than others. Because again, some of us might have already stretched and stretched and stretched, and God is going to say, hey, will you stretch once again? Some people are stretching for the first time, so they're not going to maybe stretch as far as others, but I believe it will look different for everybody in the room. But I just want to ask you, what is your stretch this year? For some of you, it might be attending church faithfully. For some of our online audience watching right now, maybe it's you know what, I know COVID is still a reality, and you got to do what you got to do for your safety, but at what point is God going to lead you? I'm going to go back and actually assemble in a group of people because there's power when we come together. For some of you, it might be finding a place to plug in and start serving. Or maybe you have been plugged in and you're serving, but this is the year that you've had something in your heart and God's been challenging you. Hey, I want to push you in a new direction. And maybe that's what stretching is for you. For some of you, it might be for the first time ever, God is stretching you to be obedient and giving. That might be what God does. He might stretch you to give. For some, it might be increasing your giving this year. For some, it may be becoming an inviter to church this year. You want to see the church grow? You know where church growth happens? It happens in the influence of people that you have. What if we all became inviters to church this year? For some, it's forgiving someone that's been holding you, that you've been holding bitterness towards for years. For some, it's letting go of anger that you need to let go of. We talked about this last week. For some, it's putting accountability in your life to not keep looking at things that nobody knows you're looking at. For some, it's asking for help in an area of your life that nobody knows you're struggling because God's stretching you. Hey, I want to get you to freedom this year. I don't want you to keep living bound. What does stretching look like for you? I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, as the pastor of this church, me and my wife have spoken so many times, and we are on the same page, beyond a shadow of a doubt. We believe that this next 12 months will be a year of stretching at Purpose Church. We personally are going to stretch our faith like never before. And when I say, again, stretching looks different for everybody. We moved to a new city not knowing hardly anybody. Moved to a new city not having a clue how this was all going to work out. But I just want to tell you, God has shown up every step of the way. And now that we're here, we don't say, well, we did it. No, we say, okay, God, here we go again. We're out into the unknown. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I need you to show up. So I just want to speak some faith to our church today, because this is one thing that we're believing for this year. Lisa and I have prayed about it. I've spoken to our overseers about it. And I've really just put a lot of thought and prayer, and I've asked God, show me, what is it to believe for this year? And in the next 12 months, we're believing that Purpose Church will find a home. In the next 12 months, we believe we find a home. We find a home in the place where God wants us to find it. Again, if you're newer with us, you don't realize this, but every Sunday, every single thing that you see is put out, is taken out of a trailer. We believe that this year, in the next 12 months, whether it's 2 months from now or whether it's 12 months from now, that we will find a home in the area that God is leading us to find a home in. And I just want to tell you, can I tell you what I've told people for the last year? For us ever to find a home in Sugar Land, it's going to take a miracle. Then that's exactly how I've said it. Hey, let's take a miracle. It was an excuse. Way to take a miracle in this city. And I felt like 2 weeks ago, it wasn't even 2 weeks ago, it was like 9 days ago, I felt like God spoke to me and said, how about instead of using a miracle as an excuse, you just started believing, hey, you remember you still serve the same miracle-working God that allowed you in the midst of a pandemic and the most crazy year that you will ever experience to just give away $33,000. You remember in the middle of a year where you know personally 5 churches who closed their doors and will never reopen. For some reason, my favor was upon you. My favor was upon your church, and I allowed you to keep moving when some people weren't allowed to. Do you remember every single time you wondered where it was going to come from and it showed up? Will you just remind yourself that that same miracle-working God is the same miracle-working God that already has your space ready for you, waiting on you, and it's just going to happen when you get to the edge and you say, I will stretch to go into what you're leading me into. I don't want to be a church that operates on the sidelines. I don't want to be a church that has fun building sandcastles on the beach and we never go into the deep. Because I believe that when we go into the deep, that is where God shows up. I believe that we serve a God that is in the deep end. I don't believe that God hangs out forever in the shallow end, waiting on Christians to come to Him. I believe that God is saying, hey, I know you're over there. Just come to me and I will keep you floating. I will keep you up. I will make a way where there is no way. Are you willing to stretch this year? Because I want to tell you, I'm willing to stretch. I'm willing to say, God, I don't know how it works. I don't have a clue what this will look like. I know what buildings cost in Sugar Land. But can I tell you something? You know who also is well aware of that? God. God is well aware of what the square footage price is in the building that He already has sitting for us. God is well aware of the person who owns the building that we will walk into and find supernatural favor with. And I don't have a doubt in my mind. I don't know why. I just have a peace that this year we find a home. So I want all of you as a church to be praying. God, help us find a home. Please don't start sending me links to everything. I'm well aware of what's, trust me, I've been watching for a while. But I just want you to start praying. God, will you help us find a home? Help us find a place where we can put roots down in this city and in this community to reach people in a new way. There are some people that just will not come to a portable church. It's fact. Some people won't do it. But if we can put down permanent roots and continue to grow what God has done, I believe that there is miracles on the other side. So one thing I failed to tell you earlier when we talked about the fact that we have given away $33,000 this year in our first year as a church. If you're new with us, you might have been expecting, oh, he's taking an offering today. We're not. I mean, we'll take our regular offering, but we're not taking a special offering. In the last year, we committed as a church that as we operate, we take a special offering once a year. And our special offering once a year is in the end of November, beginning of December, and we call it Legacy. We call it our legacy offering, and we always have something that we're giving toward. Last year, it was to help us get the equipment that we needed to go online. And there was a couple other projects that we did, finding a way to let the community know that we were here in a greater way. I just want to tell you that right now, legacy offering is going to be here in about 2 months, give or take, 3 months. I just want you to start praying, God, what would you have me give this year? Because everything that comes into legacy this year, I believe, is for our future. We're going to continue to save everything that we can save. And again, if you look at what we've given away, you can see that we are a church that does not stockpile. We are a church that we try to wisdom and be stewards of what God sends us. Our goal as a church was to give away 10% of every single dollar that comes in. I can tell you, if you do the math, don't think that was 10% of what came in. It is significantly higher. Just this year, in the year of 2020, over the last 9 months, our church has given away 21% of every dollar that has come in. 21% of every dollar that is coming in this year in 2020, we have given away because we just felt our community needed it. There's churches that need it. There's people that are waiting for us to step through and help. But I believe that right now, God has called us this year for legacy. Every dollar that comes in, we're going to say, God, we're going to take the resources that come in, we're going to believe for a miracle, and we're going to say, what is next? And we're going to have money to move when God says to move. So I don't know what all of this will look like over the next 12 months. But what I can tell you, and something that me and Lisa have talked about, and she's so much smarter than I am, and she had some amazing ideas. But when we find a place that we feel this could be it, like this is a legitimate possibility, we've done some due diligence, and we feel like this might be a place where we can move, everybody will find out about that. And this was her idea, and I loved it, but more than likely what we will do on a Sunday night is say, everybody, meet us at such and such address because we're going to pray over this building. Because if it's not supposed to happen, we don't want it to happen. But if it is, we need God to start opening some doors that no man can close. But we also want Him to close doors that no man can open because we don't want to be somewhere where we're not supposed to be. But I just want to close today with just this simple thought, and the team can come up. But I spoke over our church in January, a word that God gave me for our church this year. And many of you were probably in the service that day. But I said I felt like God spoke to me that your church will operate an unusual favor. Unusual favor was the word that God gave me. And even as I said it, it's easy to say a word sometimes and think, man, checks are in the mail. Like, because that's human thinking. But what I have seen God do over the past 9 months is allow us to operate in unusual favor. He's opened doors for us that don't really make sense to be opened. Giving away what we have gone away. I want to tell you, that's not normal. There's churches far larger than us that will not approach the number that God has allowed us to give away this year. But I believe that God is a rewarder of those who do what He tells them to do. But I was speaking to someone this week, one of our overseers. You got to meet him a few weeks back. His name is Pastor Welby. They praise God, they are back in church today. First service since March the 8th. So they are back in church in the Cypress area. Can't wait to text him after church. He always texts me to ask how we went, so I'm going to try to text him first. But I called him on Thursday, and I just said, hey, man, just pray with me about a couple things, just some things going, just wanting God's peace on a couple things. Let me know what to happen. And he told me, he said, I just want to talk to you about something. He said, I told my wife last night. So he told his wife that it's weird the favor that Derek and Lisa and their church are operating in. It's weird. He said it doesn't make sense. He said, I don't know what all y'all did or why God's doing what He's doing, but He is allowing y'all to have favor right now that is not normal, especially in this season. And I told him, I said, the word that God gave me back in January was unusual favor. And as soon as I said it, he said, that's it. He said, it's unusual. He said, I'm not saying it's crazy. He knows everything about our finances. He's an overseer. He has access to all of that. So if you're wondering, we have oversight, we have governed, over pastors that are bigger than us that see what we do. And I let them know where we're at because we think accountability is important. But he knows where we're at. And he just told me, he said, bro, it is unusual to do what God is allowing y'all to do right now. And he gave me this word, and it's a word that I believe we're going to operate in this year. It was very simple. It's not profound. But he said, I just feel like what I need to tell you right now is there's going to be opportunities that come. There's going to be opportunities that are coming your way that you don't know about yet. And I just want to tell you, go until God says no. Go until God says no. So I want to tell you, this year, we're going to operate with the mindset of, you know what, if an opportunity comes before us, even if it looks like something that's a little bit out of our reality, I'm going to go until God says no. I'm going to go until God says, nope, no way that's going to work. If there's something that we even think is a potential, I'm going to go until God says no. Because I've seen Him show up too many times. I've seen His favor in our life too many times. I was telling our worship team this morning, and I just want to make sure everybody in our church understands what we have walked in this year. When I say unusual favor, I'm not saying Pastor Derek and Pastor Lisa have unusual favor. When I say unusual favor, I'm not just trying to say Purpose Church, this location, we have unusual favor. There are people in this room that have undoubtedly walked through unusual favor this year. There are people in this room that have lost jobs, and God has carried you through in an unusual way. There are relationships in this room that have been strained, but God has restored them in unusual ways. And I just want to say, God, I believe right now prophetically over our church, I have never felt this more than right now, but I believe that Purpose Church and everybody in here, we are literally living under an open heaven. And I just want to say, God, if you will pour it out, we will steward it the best that we can. We will bless everyone that we can. We will reach every single person that needs to know Jesus in this city and around the world through outreach partners, because I believe that when God can get to a point where the Bible says that He runs to and fro throughout the earth looking for a place where He can show Himself strong on their behalf, I believe God gave me a vision that His eyes were bouncing back and forth and they just stopped. Because He said, there's a place that will be faithful with what I give them. There's a place place that will give the message in which I tell them to give. There is a place with a group of people that even in circumstances when finances are tight, they're going to still continue to honor me with what I've asked them to honor me with. I want to tell you, church, this is an unusual year, but for whatever reason, God has given us unusual favor. And I don't want to take it for granted. I don't want to miss our moment. Because I believe for whatever reason, I want to tell you, it feels crazy to even talk like this. It feels crazy to even feel like God is leading me to say what I'm saying, but I felt like God said, hey, just step out. See what happens. Because God shows up in the deep. Are you willing to go into the deep this year? Are you willing? God, right now I pray over every person in this room. God, I pray that you would challenge each and every person in this room, God, to go into the deep. God, cause us and challenge us to stretch this year. Don't let us be a church that stands on the sidelines. Don't let us be a church that uses excuses of the year and COVID and everything that's happened to not be able to move forward in faith. But God, I pray right now that every single person in this room, God, our faith would go to new levels. Our trust would go to new levels. God, we would realize we don't know how it's going to happen, but we know it's going to happen. I pray for our online family watching right now. Grow their faith. Stretch them. God, allow them to be a part of what you want to do in this city and in this season. In your name I pray. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you just made that decision to follow Jesus, we would love to celebrate with you and give you a free gift. Please email us at info@purposechurchtx.com, and we'd love to get back with you as soon as possible. Join us again next week. Thank you so much.